Welcome. In the last lesson, we looked at how you use functions, and then how you group your code into functions and they execute together when you call the function. Like this example here, addition. You give two parameters, and then it will return the addition of the two parameters supplied to it, and put it in the variable called result. And when you supply the arguments and you call the function, you get the result. So now we're going to look at if you have multiple arguments, and maybe you are not sure how many arguments are going to be in the code you are writing. So you could use the star args to check the blog, the details there. So basically what you do is when you're defining parameters, you put this star and then the argument you want to use. So people write args, but for this case, I'm using num, for example, for numbers. So I'll say for a in num, then return the sum of whatever arguments I have here. So, but because we don't know how many arguments are going to be supplied, so here we supplied 8 arguments. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I run this, it should give me the addition of 1 to 8. Oh, sorry, I didn't print. So that is it. So if I say print result, so if I run this now, it should give me 36. And 36 is a summation from 1 to 8. So that is using the star args method or way of doing this. If you don't know how many arguments you're going to need, so instead of just, so we could also have what is known as the default parameter. Default parameter. So I'll comment this one out. So the default parameter is you have, let's say here you have A and you have B. So I could say that B is 5, for example. So what happens is if I supply one argument, let's say 2. So it's already knows that there's a default parameter for B, which is 5. So if I run this, it should be giving 7. Yes. So it's giving 7 as a summation because the B has a default parameter already attached to it. But what if I now give it another parameter to override that? So if I now put 9, for example. So what it will do is it will override the parameter supplied there before. So it will now do the addition of 2 and 9. But if you're doing this, make sure that if you're going to give the default parameters, you give the default parameters after you've given the positional parameter. This one is called the positional parameter because it's there by position. Then the default parameters. So you can have as many as you want. So you can have B, for example, you have C equals 3, maybe D equals 5. And then you can return C plus D. So if we come here, because we have 2 default parameters and we have 2 positional parameters. So we need to supply just the parameters for the positional parameters. But if we need to, so it will just take the default ones we've given over there. But if we need to overwrite those ones, we can now supply parameters for them as well. So if you do this, it will now do this addition instead of what is having. So this one, if you know the parameters, you're going to have the number of parameters. But if you don't know the number of parameters that you're going to be working with, you can use this other way, the star args, the arguments method. That way you can supply as many parameters as you want, as many arguments as you want, and then it will, Python will just run it for you. So lastly, what I want us to look at is something called the docstring. So the docstring is similar to your comments, but it is part of the documentation for the particular function. So all the functions, the inbuilt functions themselves, they have docstrings. So how you do that is you put 3 quotation marks, and then you write what the function is for. So I will say this function has all arguments supplied to it. So it's not part of the documentation for this particular function. If you run it, so you see, so if you run it, that's what happens. So it will give this docstring is not part of the function. So later on, somebody can inspect what the docstring is. So, and then the way to inspect it is to print. You say print, and then what is the function called? Addition. Then dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. That's how you inspect what the docstring is. So maybe somebody's looking at your code, they are not sure what it does, or so it's a helpful way of reading what it does. So you can also check for some of the inbuilt functions as well. So let's say for print itself, you want to know the docstring for print. So if you run print and then you doc underscore, so this is the docstring for print. So this is what it does. So if you can read the documentation to find out. You can try for input, for example, input also, another inbuilt function. So if you run, so this is the docstring here for input, which you can read, see what it does if you want. So today we learned that we can have multiple parameters, but we can also have default parameters, which you give them values. When you supply the positional parameters, those parameters are used by the program. But if you supply parameters for them, supply arguments, is going to override the parameters we've given over there. But if you don't know the number of parameters you're going to have, maybe you're going to have multiple parameters, then you can use the star args method. So you put the star and then the arguments, and then you could supply as many arguments as you want, and then the program will run them. And then lastly, we looked at what docstrings are. Docstrings, a bit like comments, but it's part of the function, just a way of letting other users know what your function does. So it's enclosed within 3 quotation marks. So you write it this way, and then it becomes part of the function. So later on, it can be inspected by writing the function dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore doc. And then that can also be used for even inbuilt functions to find out what the doctrine is about. If there are any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them as much as I can. Thank you very much.